This is the last workbench tour, and as you can see, we have secretly replaced Megan's workbench with this workbench to see if she'd notice. This is actually a commercial workbench that I have modified these last few months, just as a personal project. Doesn't really matter which brand, they all kind of stink. So you may see the brand in some of these clips, but don't make anything of it. They all kind of stink. Lots of modifications here. Let's start with the bench top. It is maple, I think. Looks like maple. 19 3/4 wide by 53 1/4 long. After my modifications, it ended up just under 34 inches off the floor. Major modifications here on the bench top are these through bolts. So I removed the puny screws and put in 5/16 inch bolts that secure it to the base. Also have added a series of hold-fast holes, which is another change, and really haven't done anything to the cheesy vise down here. But I have done something that might earn me $1, and that is I'm just about to install a bench-crafted planing stop here up at the front, but I haven't had the time this week. The top started out as 1 inch thick. That is, of course, not very thick. I added 2 layers of plywood, thickening it up to obviously 2.5 inches thick. And I've added this crochet, which I attached with lag bolts so that I actually could work on faces and edges using pegs or holdfasts. So many modifications to discuss. The base is white pine and wasn't supposed to be glued together, but I glued it up together to sort of add some strength. But the big changes are I added panels all around the outside of the base, and these plywood panels are just screwed on to resist racking forces. The back of the workbench got a really big panel, and this one is actually wedged in pretty tightly between the top and bottom bearers of the base, which also adds to the stability of the whole thing. So these panels really helped stop the racking of the base, and also added quite a lot of weight, which we'll get to here in a little bit. Another effort to reduce racking is I added these shelf brackets, which are simply screwed to the bench top and the base. And you can buy these for a few dollars at the home center. And I've used them on cheap benches before, and they really do help stiffen up the front of the workbench, and they look really nice too. Another effort to add weight is I piled on a bunch of scrap plywood to the shelf down below. So there's a real thin, cheesy shelf there. And then I added about 4 layers of 3/4 inch plywood that was just scrap in our shop, and that also added to the weight of the whole thing. When we do finally put this bench in its place, we will lag it or use some sort of concrete anchors. This will probably go into the machine room if we do end up keeping it, and that will fix its wagon for sure. I also added these 3/4 inch holes in the front legs. These accept the plastic dogs that come with this bench. And I actually quite like the plastic dogs. I prefer them to metal ones for sure, especially when a plane encounters them. So this helps me plane long edges, and are positioned every about 3.5 inches. Here you can see the underside of the top and how I notched out the plywood for the bars of the vise that allow the jaw to stay somewhat parallel. And here is the vise. No modifications to the vise. It ain't great, but it's better than nothing. And I'm glad that I have this row of dogs here right up the front edge, which is where they should be. All in all, I'm happy with how the bench turned out. It's pretty heavy. It started out at 57 pounds and I got it up to 138 pounds. which is nice. The base is really stiff. It doesn't move when I'm playing with it, especially when it's secured to the floor. It doesn't move at all. But still, the bench was $200, and for $200 you can buy almost 1,000 pounds of yellow pine, and just that big pile of yellow pine is probably a more stable workbench than this. But if you do inherit one of these, as some people do, these are some of the modifications you could make to it in the meantime. My modifications cost maybe $40 or $50 total. That'll make it a halfway decent, maybe use it in a pinch workbench.